officer, and I was in 2 different airborne or parachute units.
And what was your highest rank during the war?
Now, during the war, I was would be captain.
Okay.
Well, I stayed in the military program, and I retired as a colonel.
Were you drafted, or did you enlist?
No, I was commissioned in 1940 and into the reserve program, and I'd applied for different tours of duty after 1940, but I was not accepted. And when Pearl Harbor came, I was ordered to extend active duty and to report to Fort Benning, Georgia.
And where were you living at the time?
I was living at 27 West Raymond Street in Hartford, Connecticut.
And do you recall your first days of service in the war?
Yes. I had 3 weeks of duty at Fort Adams, Rhode Island in 1940. That was only in the reserve. And my first tour was, I started out, I had to go to Fort Des Moines, Iowa for a physical. When I came back to Hartford to pick up my equipment, I had to go to Fort Wright at Fisher's Island for another physical. And I reported to Fort Benning, Georgia in early April of 1942. And my most vivid impressions were coming from Connecticut and going down into a segregated southern state. It was very, very vivid. But the infantry school class I attended was an outstanding class. I knew nothing when I got down there. And I remember meeting a lot of people from Florida, Georgia, and other southern states, and others from different parts of the country. And it was really an excellent course. We were stationed out the far end of Fort Benning, Georgia, in what was called Harmony Church. And we were there because someone couldn't add 2 and 2 and get 4. And they had overbooked our class, and we were the overbooking, and we were out off the main post. But we went back to the main post later on, and I graduated from the infantry school in August of 1942.
Where exactly did you go during World War II?
When I got out of the infantry school, I had signed up for the parachute school at Fort Benning, and I took the parachute jump course, and I was assigned to the Company I of the 3rd Battalion, 502nd Parachute Infantry, which is in the Alabama training area at Fort Benning. And we were there for 6 weeks, and we were moving up to Fort Bragg to form the 101st Airborne Division. And I was only there about 5 or 6 days, and I was sent off with a replacement group of 12 second lieutenants and 160 basic privates to England, where we joined the 2nd Battalion, 503rd Parachute Infantry at Chilton Foliot in Hungerford, Berkshire. And we didn't know it at the time, but they were already staging for the North African invasion, and we weren't supposed to be there in the first place. We were supposed to be going right to North Africa after the invasion. So we did nothing there for 6 weeks, and then we followed the battalion to North Africa by ship. And we came into Oran. We took a train to Algiers, and we were stationed in a little town called Maison Carré, just outside of Algiers. And the main body of the battalion was in Tunisia by that time. And the battalion did come back in January of 1943, and Colonel Raff, who was the commander at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Edson D. Raff, Jr., was promoted to full colonel, sent back to the United States to form a new regiment. And we were at Maison Carré for a few months. Then we went to Boufarik, Algeria for training, and then we were sent out to Oujda, Morocco to form the 5th Army. And while we were there, in May of 1943, the 82nd Airborne Division was sent over from the United States, and they were bivouacked in Morocco. They didn't take any part in the North African operations. And we went with them to Tunisia, and the 82nd only went into Sicily in July of 1943. And we followed them to Sicily, and the battalion was called on for an unexpected mission in September of 1943 to jump at Avellino, Italy, to block the roads into the Salerno beachhead. I wasn't there because I was still back bringing up the supplies, and I got an LST at Palermo, Sicily, and took the battalion, the rest of the battalion, into Naples, and I joined the battalion in Naples around the 1st of October. And I learned that Colonel Yardley, our commander at that time, had been captured at the Avellino operation, and we had a new commander, Lieutenant Colonel William P. Yarborough, Jr., who had come from the 504th, and he appointed me adjutant of the battalion, and our next operation was at Venafro, Italy, on the Volturno front. We captured the two mountains, Mount Corno and Mount Croce, at Venafro, and we were there on the line from November 9th of 43 until late in December. We were brought back to Naples to stage for the Anzio beachhead operation. We went to Anzio Beach by boat. We were on the HMS Winchester Castle, and we went down cargo nets with no training, and we took LC-8 onto the beachhead. I was the first boat with Colonel Yarborough, and we were well into the beachhead and doing very well. We got this incredibly stupid order from 6th Corps to stop and dig in, and allowed the Germans to come in all around the beachhead in the mountains, and like shooting fish in a rain barrel. And the battalion broke out of the beachhead around May of 44. The Anzio invasion was January 22nd of 1944, and we broke out in May of 44, and were stationed at Lido di Roma to prepare for the southern France invasion. And the battalion then jumped into southern France in August 14th, 15th of 1944, and we operated in the mountains of southern France for several months, and then we were sent up to a town called WWII in France, just below Paris, and we had a little difficulty there because the unit that came there ahead of us had gone to the railroad station and blown the safe open and stolen all the stamps that were being sold. But we got a shipment of oranges, and we had the mayor give them out to the children, so it made some nice points there. And then around the Battle of the Bulge started 16th of December of 44. We were notified about 2 o'clock in the morning that there'd be trucks there to take us up to the forward area somewhere about December 23rd, I believe. And we went by these trailer trucks up to the battle area, and we were at the Manhay Crossroads, and we were on the Arizi-Soy Highway. We had a big fight at a little town called Sazzo, and at that time we were attached to the 3rd Armored Division, and then we continued on, and we were attached later on to the 7th Armored Division at Saint-Vith and Trois Ponts, where we were disbanded. We were just about wiped out. There were about 7 officers and 43 men left standing, and I was sent to the 505th Parachute Infantry of the 82nd Airborne Division, and they put me in the intelligence section of S2, and we went up to the Rhine River, and we got to a little town called Vaseling just the day before they were going to open the oil plant, which they didn't open. We were on the Rhine River doing operations there for I would say most of March and into April, and then we were sent up to the Elbe River. We did the Elbe River crossing, and by that time it was pretty much all over, and we were chasing the Germans across Germany, and I was with the division in the Vaseling, I figured there was all those towns there, but we did liberate the Vobelin concentration camp in Germany. I forget the town at the moment, and I remember the worst part of it was there was a big room there with a lot of empty clogs, wooden clogs that were worn by the prisoners. It was a starvation camp, and it just was, what we didn't see was worse than what we might have seen, because it was just indicated all these people had been there, had been starved to death. And I remember I took the commandant's gun, which I'm going to give to the museum when I get around to it, and we went into the commandant's home, and we were searching it for contraband, and I remember I was taking the books off the shelves of the library, just throwing them out on the floor, and his wife got very objectionable, and I told my interpreter, I said, just tell this Nazi pig that if she doesn't shut her mouth, I'll cut her throat. I wouldn't have done it. I did find a book on the shelf of the 1936 Olympics, which had a picture of Ivan Fuqua, who had won a track and field event, and he had become the track coach at the University of Connecticut. I sent him the book. And then we came back from Germany and went into back to France, and then we were either supposed to go to Japan, but the war ended, and we went to Berlin for occupation duty. Oh, the concentration camp, by the way, was located in Ludwigslust, and we went to Berlin for occupation duty, and we were there from the early summer until late in December, and then we came back through England in end of '45, and we had the Victory Parade up Fifth Avenue in January of 1946, and I think the thing I remember most in Berlin was when the Nazis came to power in 1932, they had desecrated the main synagogue in Berlin, and the chaplain, the army chaplain of Berlin district, which was going to control Berlin, was a rabbi, and he found out who I was. I'm a Kohen, which means I'm a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses. And it was just coming on to the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And at any of the readings of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, the first honor of blessing the Torah must be given to a Kohen. And the rabbi opened the synagogue and rededicated it. And I had the first aliyah in the synagogue. I felt like I felt like Judah Maccabee at Jerusalem opened the temple, and the whole half of the congregation were Soviet soldiers who had been hiding their religious beliefs from the Soviets for many, many years, and it was just one of these things that you would never forget, and it was very, very impressive. And I came home with the division, and after prayer, I stayed in the reserve program, and finally wound up in the Pentagon. I retired out of the Pentagon.
Did you earn any awards or medals while you were?
Yeah, I got the Combat Infantryman Badge, Bronze Star Medal V with an oak leaf cluster, European African Middle Eastern Service Medal with 9 battle stars and a bronze invasion arrowhead, and then routine stuff like the Victory Medal, Occupation Medal, Reserve Service Medal, and I also got the French Medal of Liberation, and our battalion earned the Presidential Unit Citation, and I got it also with the 82nd Airborne Division. And then when the battalion had jumped in Tunisia, they contacted a French unit, the 3rd Zawar Regiment, and they authorized us, the North African Theater authorized us to wear their insignia, which is it's a metallic disc with this jackal posed on it, which says, "Je suis, je reste." I'm here, I'm going to stay here. And of course, I earned my parachute wings, and that's all I can think of.
Did you sustain any injuries?
No.
And, how many casualties did you say?
Battalion, we had altogether probably 800 men in the unit. In all the operations, I believe we sustained under 150 people killed, but a lot of guys were wounded. Especially on the Anzio beachhead, we had a lot of we'd have a man wounded 2 or 3 times, or someone wounded once or twice, come back and get killed, so that the number of casualties may have exceeded the number of men in the outfit. but we had a high percentage of casualties.
And were you directly in combat?
Yes. I just don't want to mislead you. I never made any combat jumps because I was not in a position to be there. Like when we went to England, our unit was not supposed to be there, so we weren't in the plans for the invasion, so we didn't jump there. In Sicily, we didn't even know there'd be an operation, so that I was sent to bring the rear supplies up in the rear administration. But my first actual physical operation, combat operation, was WWII, and I was in the actual assault with the colonel. And the Anzio operation, I was in the first boat with the colonel. Southern France, again, the colonel would not take me along, and but we did conduct combat operations up in the mountains. And we got to Belgium, in the Bulge, I was actually in full combat operations. I have a story on that kind of chilling. I was out on a patrol with a fellow named Harry Pritchett. He was another lieutenant with me. West Pointer, a very, very competent guy. And it was after the fight at a little town called Sadzio. It was a very bloody battle. And we went down the road, and we saw this light tank with a soldier who was killed. He was in the turret and had a shell through him. And we got to a clearing, and we saw these troops coming toward us out of the woods. The rule of thumb then was if someone's wearing a long overcoat, you're probably a German. Most of the GIs wore short jackets or short jacket type uniforms. And these guys were wearing long overcoats. And it was late in the afternoon, it was dark, and we were scared and tired and cold, and you're always scared. And we were sure it was a German patrol. So Harry and I got down behind a log, and he had a submachine gun with a full drum, and I had a carbine with the magazines taped back to back. And they started to come out of the woods, and we were absolutely positive they were Germans. We were sure they were Germans. And they came out, and we were actually squeezing the triggers, and we had them dead in our sights. And just by a miracle, a little cloud opened up, and some light came down, hit this guy on the shoulder, and I saw the red keystone, which is the Pennsylvania Army National Guard, the 28th Division. And I told Harry, hold up, and we crawled away. And years later, I was at some kind of military party, and I went to the bar for a drink, and I was talking with some guy at the bar. We began comparing notes about the war. And he was in the 28th Division. He was on a patrol that late afternoon in Belgium in December. He was going towards Sadzio with his group. They came to this clearing, and we got to, and this is the man in that patrol. And I was drinking with this guy I almost killed. It was a very chilling experience. But Harry and I never forgot that.
Any other memorable experiences?
Yes, happily, most of them are funny. My kids, my two daughters picked this one up for their first school essay. When we were in North Africa, the supply system was hopelessly bogged down. They expected just going to North Africa and thought the Germans just fold up and float away, which didn't happen. So they were always short of supplies. And come Thanksgiving of '42, we were authorized to buy from the local economy, and it was like 60 cents a pound and 60 pounds per 100 men. So I arranged with a local merchant, Benani Mohammed, to provide the turkeys. So he comes to me just before Thanksgiving. He tells me that the chief of police in that small town had confiscated the turkeys because he thought they were in the black market. So he says if I would come with him, I could get it straightened out. He says, I said, where is it? Well, it's Satano. And he had this old alcohol-burning truck. I'm wearing my dirty set of fatigues and an old GI raincoat, and I'm carrying a gun and wearing my boondockers, and my only ID was my dog tag. So we started down the road, and he had to stop every 10 miles to clear there's a jelly forms in the carburetor. And we're going and going and going and going and going, and eventually we get to a marker. He's there. It's at St. Arnaud, 240 kilometers, which is another couple hundred miles. So we got there after going through a lot of railroad barriers and getting these ladies out of bed to open the railroad barriers, and the truck dies, and we meet some of his Arab friends, and they have an old 38 Buick in a garage, so we took the Buick into St. Arnaud, and the cop says, I'm awfully sorry, but I thought they was going to in the black market, and I gave him the British. Of course, we knew the British guy, we never get him back. So I said, this man works for me, he'll get some more turkeys, leave him alone, or I'll be some trouble. So next question, how to get it back, because the truck was dead. So I went to this little Arab cafe in the square, and it was like a scene out of one of these Monogram or Republic movies about the Foreign Legion, and there was Foreign Legionnaires there, and these Goumiers, these Arab troops with the green fezzes, and it was like a casting director's office. And I was sitting there all night drinking this Turkish coffee at a franc a throw. And the next morning I get up, and there's a convoy out there, American convoy. So I talked to Seal, and he said, no, he said, we're going out to Constantine. But the chaplain said, I'm going back to Algiers if you want to ride. So I got in the truck with him. And so we get out of town, and the truck throws a fan belt. We finally got a hold of a fan belt, but it was too loose, and we kept stopping every 5 or 10 miles to put more water in. And then he says to me, do you have any idea on you? Says they've been dropping German parachutes. I said, that's a lot of baloney. They weren't, but they were dropping parachutes, he said. So all I had was my dog tags. So he kept an eye on me, and I got back to the headquarters, and he watched the guard sloop me in, and then he took off. We got the turkeys for Christmas. So the day after the dinner, we had a censor mail. Part of our job was to censor mail. And I got across a letter from some kid. He says, today, Mom, we had hot roast stuffed turkey. Gee, I hate roast turkey. I could have killed him. And both my girls, I told the story, and they wrote these up as essays in high school, and it went over big. But there was occasionally a lot of things that we got away with. I should admit these things, but we got into southern France, and we had attached to us a unit of M8 armored cars. These were 6-wheel vehicles with a very powerful truck engine, and they could go like blazes, and I wanted to drive one. There's nothing worse than an irresponsible, nitwit, 24-year-old lieutenant in an airborne outfit. We know everything. So I had a couple of my guys with me, went down the garage, and we sweet-talked the sergeant, let us have a vehicle. If you've ever been in Nice, the whole area behind Nice at the mountains are all full of these hairpin turns and switchback roads, and we were having a wild old time driving there. We came around one turn, started down the mountain, and a Jeep comes up toward us, and there is, of course, in the Jeep, the commanding officer who owned the armored car, and he was not a happy camper. And he gets out and he stops and he says, what are you doing with that unprintable vehicle? So I gave a song and dance about road testing. And he says to us in unmistakable terms, get that unprintable vehicle back to the unprintable garage now. And we got away with it. Nothing ever happened after that. But another occasion back in North Africa, we were stationed at Oujda, Morocco. And incidentally, when I went to Disney World a couple of years ago, we went to the Moroccan place in Epcot, and my waiter was from Oujda. He knew every place we'd been there. And we used to go to Tlemcen, just over the border in Algeria, it's an old Moorish town, and play baseball, usually against the hospital team. So we were there one day, and a young kid, about 10, 11 years old, comes over to us to talk to me. And we got to having a conversation, and he finds out I'm Jewish. He says, would you like to come to a Passover Seder? I said, I'd love to do it. So he gives me his sister comes over, she gives me directions of where to go. It's in Tlemcen, it's up on the hill, the villa, Carpe Diem, and so forth, and how to get there. And I make all kinds of arrangements to get a vehicle and give up my rights to a vehicle for the next 6 months, and I have to have somebody cover for me. So I drive down there that afternoon at night when I get there, and I go there to the house, and it's dark, and there's no one there. I'm banging on the door, ringing the doorbell, and there's no one there. So I'm a little bit ticked off, and decided to go back to the base, and I started out, and the MP stopped me and said, you can't go because there are Arab marauders out, and you may not get home alive tonight. So I went to the hospital, and they gave me a bunk for the evening, and I took off back to Ujda. So we went there again and to play baseball, and the same kid comes over, and I was a little bit ticked off, and I said, you know, hey, here's the stupid American lieutenant. It's a good job. I'm not mad, he said. I said, you know, it was a good gag, and he was upset. So he raised his sister over, and I said, you know, I'm not criticizing this youngster, but I made a lot of trouble to go there, and there was no one there. He said, well, I'm sorry. She said, there was supposed to be a gendarme there who was supposed to tell you how to get to my grandmother's house. So it was all right. It worked out okay. But they introduced me to some people in Ujda, and I met these people in Ujda. It was very nice. But we pulled off a lot of stunts there and got away with it. Coming back in Berlin, we had a truck convoy to go back from Berlin to what they call Camp Oklahoma City, which is one of the redeployment camps in France. And they had planned to spend the night overnight on some cold hillside out in the open in Belgium. So one of my guys says, Lieutenant says, I know where there's a restaurant in Belgium. You get a nice steak dinner, wine, a few drinks, and some Belgian pastries. So I said, okay, well, we'll try it. So we started off, and then we pulled off the road, and we raised the hood, you know, faked a breakdown, and the convoy disappears down the road, and we switch over, and we had a great time. And the next morning we get up, and it's fog you could cut with a knife. I had a couple of guys draped over the front fenders with flashlights to find the road. We finally got into camp at Oklahoma City, and I told the S4, the supply officers, I'm sorry, we got lost or had a breakdown. He uttered some unprintable word, and that was the end of that. We got away with it. So some years later, I was at Fort Benning. I took the advanced course at the infantry school, and I ran into this same guy, the S4, Jake Wagner, and he says, hey, come on over to my house for dinner. So I went over to the house, and we were talking. And that nice thing, I said, by the way, Jake, I said, did you really believe us when I told you about that breakdown? I wouldn't believe you no good so-and-sos for all the rice in China. And we got away. It was all right. It was funny. But the other things, you don't want to remember a lot of the other things. But I did have one experience that I didn't know until years later that there was some directive that if you were Jewish, you weren't supposed to go to Europe. But it wouldn't have made much difference. If you went to the Pacific, you'd be much worse off in the Pacific. But there were a lot of soldiers who were Jewish who were captured, and came to Gestapo treated them very, very badly. But we captured this pilot on the Anzio beachhead. He was shot down, and we had to find out where the airfield was so that we could get what was called the Air Corps to go over there and wipe out the airfield. And he was very stubborn. So I said to the interrogator, most of our interrogators were Jewish refugees because they knew the language, the inflections, the subtleties and the inflections, and also the areas. And some guy would say, I live at 236 Berlinstrasse in Hamburg. And I could say, there's no such street in Hamburg. Now tell the truth. So I told my interrogator, I said, tell this unprintable so-and-so who and what I am. And he says to the guy, der Oberleutnant here is ein Jude. The lieutenant here is Jewish. And this guy turned the color of dirty ashes. I thought he was going to drop dead in his tracks, and he became very cooperative. They really had a very terrible fear of falling in the hands of anybody that was Jewish because of what they had done. But we did have another one that was funny. A lot of times we're doing things to just get away with it and just to have a good time and get away from the tension and stress. And we were chasing the Germans over the Elbe River, and I had my intelligence section with me, and maybe about 3 jeeploads of guys. And we came to a farmhouse, and we wanted to check it out, make sure it was clear. We went in there, and the civilians had gone, but there was a big pot of boiling water on the stove, and this enormous brownstone crock full of fresh eggs. And one of the guys could cook, so I looked at it. So we had boiled eggs and fried eggs and scrambled eggs and fresh eggs for the first time in weeks, or months as a matter of fact. And I decided to wash up, and I took the old helmet, had a removable steel top, and I filled it full of hot water, and I stripped down the waist, and I was washing up, and I started to shave, and I got my face full of lather, and this convoy of Jeeps roars in the yard, and the front Jeep has a big red plate with a silver star. It was General Ira P. Swift, the Assistant Division Commander. He'd come from the 1st Armored Division, a real hard-nosed. So he gets out of the Jeep and, "Who's in charge here?" "I am, sir." Face full of lather. And he said, "You are?" "I am Lieutenant Katz, sir, the 505th Regiment S2. "What's going on here?" "Well, sir," big show the wristwatch, "we're supposed to link up with Colonel so-and-so at the crossroads at 1100 hours, and we're ahead of schedule." And he knew what was going on. He didn't fool him. He looked around and he kind of grinned. He said, "Okay, carry on." And then he took off. And we finished the eggs, by the way.
Yeah. Now I'm going to ask a little bit more about your daily life.
All right.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
V-mail. They had a pretty good V-mail system. You would write letters. They would print them out at the post office and reduce them inside. Then they send them in bulk over to the United States by airmail, and then they print them out and send them to your family. Sometimes I would write regular letters. But it was a good system. Main problem was, of course, in the early, at least in the early days, something would be sent to me, and my mother made me a fruit cake, and happily she made it with a lot of rum, and it was on a ship that got sunk in the harbor at Oran. I got it 9 months later. It was still good.
What was the food like?
It was average, very ordinary. It was, for a while we did very well. When we went out to Oujda, Morocco, we were directly with 5th Army, and our commander, at that time it was Yardley, had a good relationship with 5th Army, and later on it was Yarborough had a good relationship. And we went out there, and our first food shipment was a shipment of an issue of frozen Long Island duck. And I had some very good cooks there. I had a fellow named John Christina, who was a pastry cook in civilian life, and you were supposed to do certain things on the field range. You couldn't do it, or they told you couldn't do it, but he didn't believe that. He would make pies and cakes on this field range. And later on, when the 82nd came in May of '43, we were under them for rations, and the food quality went down the drain. It was average, but the early days in North Africa, they were short of rations. They didn't have a good supply system worked up. But the food was adequate.
Did you feel a lot of pressure or stress?
Always, yeah. Someone described it once as hours of boredom followed by moments of terror. And you never knew what was going to come up next. But we made the best of it when we weren't actually doing something on the line. And we were very well adjusted. The main thing was we were a very good outfit. It was a high morale outfit, experienced guys with me, and you could survive very well with that.
Was there something special you did for good luck?
I don't think so. I really don't believe so.
What did you do for entertainment, for their entertainment?
I remember when the 82nd came over, there was a funny relationship there. The 82nd staff people were upset because we had gotten there first. And they thought they were going to be in there first. But our battalion got there in England in June of '42, and with the first outfit into action. They didn't come over until the war was over in North Africa. And they resented it. They took it out on us. And Bob Hope came over with a USO show. And they wouldn't let my battalion go to the USO show, the Bob Hope show. They're very petty about this. We had one show with Alec Templeton, the famous pianist, and there was an exhibition. I met Joe Louis in Italy. He was doing a boxing exhibition. Very nice guy. He was very quiet, very low key, and he did something very nice. He knew that the guys who were going up there with him in the ring were just from the units. They were just really inexperienced guys. Maybe some guy might have boxed in high school or college, but he could make hash out of them. But he didn't. He carried them for 3 or 4 rounds. He didn't want to embarrass them in front of their friends. He made them look good in front of their friends. But a very nice, very quiet gentleman, real nice guy. I remember we went to a performance in Naples. Lily Pones, the famous soprano, who was, by the way, born in Boufrique, Algeria, where we were stationed for a while, and her husband, Andrew Castellanets, and they did a show, a performance in Naples. I don't recall too much else to entertainment, but... Yeah, we go in, if there was a town nearby, we go in and have a few drinks, or we have our own setup. And when we were station leader to Roma, it was a building which was built by the fascisti, and I remember the barracks had a stick of bombs across, but the rest of the building was beautiful. Then we had a building down near the barracks for an officer's residence and club, and we went into Rome. We hired this barber. We took his whole shop out to Lido, set him up and fed him, and the money was his, and then we got all through. We brought him back to Rome before the invasion, and we did very well there. And I remember going into Rome, and I met her in Berlin in Rome. He was there, they were touring with that show, This Is the Army. I met him at some bar down there. Very, very quiet, low-key guy, very pleasant, very friendly.
Did you keep a personal diary while you were there?
No, I didn't. I took a lot of pictures. When we went to the Anzio beachhead, we knocked over the Villa Borghese, which is just down the road from the casino when we went in there. And I remember I was with one of my guys, Fisco. We went up the stairs, and there was a door that was locked, and we did one of these things like on the movies, and Fisco had a submachine gun. I said, Dick, give him the business. He blows the door with a submachine gun. I go in there with a grenade, a pistol. The guys were gone. The Germans had jumped out the back window, and our guys took care of them out in the backyard. So we came back down, and I had another guy with me, Leone, and we went into what would be the living room, which were the headquarters of the Germans and the Italian naval people who were there with the Germans. And they had a map of the beachhead with all the mines on it, which the engineers went nuts over. And they had food there, German pumpernickel in cans, and cheese and toothpaste tubes. And on the sideboard was a camera, 4 or 5 camera, and a bottle of scotch. So I said, Leon, what do you want? He said, I want the scotch, Lieutenant. So I gave him the scotch, and I took the camera. And I took pictures from there on all through the end of the war. And that was the record I made. I took tremendous pictures.
Who were the people in photographs?
Guys from the unit, German prisoners, a few dead Germans, some of the civilians we knew. I took pictures of the Italian police, the Carabinieri in Naples. We got to Rome, and I took pictures of all the places I went to in Rome. And I sent those home, and my mother knew this priest in Hartford, and she contacted him, and he identified the places where which I had taken pictures of. I couldn't identify them in the letter, but he knew where they were, so she knew where I was in Rome. And there was something funny about that. There's a square in Rome where there's a statue of an elephant on a pedestal, and there's an obelisk on the back of the elephant commemorating the victory over Hannibal, built by the Romans. And I took a picture of that. And I was there in 2004 with a group that we had, and my wife and a friend of hers, and a travel agent. And I found the same square, and I would picture myself with the same statue, the two pictures 60 years apart. And fascinating. And when we were in Rome, I took pictures of the Castle San Angelo, Hadrian's tomb, and the Colosseum, and all the very famous places in Rome. And I pictured in Paris at the first celebration in May of '45, and on the way home on the show. I got a lot of pictures.
After the war, did you stay in service?
Yeah, I stayed in the reserve program, and I had a lot of active duty. I used to be able to go to I went to law school on the GI Bill, and I'd find some kind of a service course that would start the day after exams, and get me out of there the day before registration. I went to the mountain training school, and I went to the armored school, and made a lot of money too, because I was on captain's pay at the time. And when I graduated law school, I went to the infantry school for 4 months, and I went into my uncle's office of practice. And then I got a command in West Hartford, the Civil Affairs Unit. I was there for 17 years, and I became the commander. And then I was promoted out of it and made full colonel. Same day my older daughter was born. And at that time, there was no vacancy. But my old commander, General Yarborough, had become G2 of the Army, the 3-star position, and he found out about it, so he got me a position at the Pentagon in DIA. And I was there for several summer training periods. It was fantastic.
How did it feel when you got home from work?
Oh, pretty good. I called home. The first thing my mother asked me was, "Do you have all your hair?"
Did you make a lot of close friendships while you were in?
Yes. I have to tell you that a lot of cynical people don't believe that. I know that the movie had a lot of mistakes in it, but don't believe this thing of Band of Brothers. But you're as close to these guys as you are to anybody else on the face of the earth. And I didn't mind. They would, someone would call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. "Hey, Morton, I'm on my way to Thailand with a military mission." You would call to say hello, and I'd tell my wife, this is what it's going to be. These guys call me. I think they can call me anytime they want to. And yes, very, very close with these people.
Have you maintained?
Yeah, well, when we were in Berlin, a couple of very bright guys formed the 82nd Airborne Division Association, and we paid in 5 years' dues. And we had a convention in Chicago in 1947. And eventually I was appointed to be National Judge Advocate of the association. And we went to a lot of conventions, and then we formed a scholarship fund, and both of my daughters got scholarships. My big girl got the Ridgway Scholarship, named for General Ridgway, which is the big one, and my younger daughter got a regular scholarship. And then from my battalion, we had a sort of a loose association, and we used to meet in New York. And I couldn't handle it anymore, and one of the other guys picked it up, and he got all these guys' addresses and names from around the country. And then we started having regular reunions, and we've been to Chicago and a lot of the Midwestern cities, and more recently near Cincinnati, Ohio. And last year, 2005, we went to New Orleans before the hurricane. We had a big reunion down there. Of course, what helps us is that the unit was reconstituted after the war with the 8th Division, and now there's a regular 509th unit with headquarters at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And these fellows do what's called OPFOR, the opposing forces, and they go to the Joint Readiness Training Center, and they make life a living hell with the combat troops to show them what it's going to be like, so that when they get there, they're going to be in some kind of shape. And interesting enough, last year I ran into somebody from the 505. When I got to the 505, I met this young priest, chaplain Captain Philip M. Hannon, and he had also performed a wedding in Berlin. When I corresponded later on, I had pictures of himself at the reunion, at the reception of the wedding, and he went on to become the Archbishop of Washington. And he gave the eulogy at the Kennedy funeral when Kennedy was assassinated. And then he was reassigned to New Orleans, where he retires, mandatory retirement at 75. And he now has, he's the head of what they call Focus. They do documentaries for the church. And when he also did the invocation at the World War II Memorial a couple of years back. And he sent me some ID badges, a big poster which I have framed, or some programs and so forth. He also sent me a St. Christopher medal, which I'm wearing right now, and along with the letter Chi for life. So I called him, I contacted him and said, "We're coming down for reunion with the 509. He said, "Okay, call me when you get there." And I called him. He came over and picked us up at the hotel, and took us to the original Emeralds. The place was jammed to the doors. He had a table in about 10 seconds, and everyone's coming over to say hello to him. He's quite a celebrity down there. And I had a very nice evening with him. And he's 93 years old and just going strong. And there's a funny corollary on that story. While we were sitting there, he was wearing, the usual black vestment and with a collar, and I was wearing a black suit. And the waiter came over, or the head waiter came over, and he took the white napkins off the table and put black napkins on there. So the next morning we went to Brennan's, which is across the square from the Harmony Hotel. It's a very famous place in New Orleans. And this time I was wearing one of the T-shirts. We buy these T-shirts from the unit so they could have money for the unit fund. And it's got a big pair of wings across the back and the 509 insignia up here. And so we're having breakfast there. And the head waiter came over. He was very interested in what I was wearing. I told him about the reunion and why I was there. And I met Archbishop Hannon and explained what the thing was all about. And we had a very nice time there. And I was getting up to leave, and the waiter comes over and says, the head waiter picked up your check. It was very nice. It was really very moving. And while I was down there, I went to the D-Day Museum, and it's not much of anything except the D-Day and Normandy and stuff in the Pacific. But they did say when they rebuild, they are going to build in more of the, show more of the D-Days, like January 22nd, Anzio, and so forth. And so on the first floor, they have a few other things, including a Higgins boat. And the lady who took me around the first floor is the granddaughter of the original Higgins who built the boats. It was had a very nice time down there.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
I probably think of 1,000 things when I get back home, but it was just, I was very lucky. I never got hurt. I was with great guys. One of our lieutenants wound up as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state of Washington afterward, Frank Hale. A lot of our guys came out very well in civilian life. General Yarborough became a 3-star general. He organized the Special Warfare School at Fort Bragg. He wound up as Army G2, which is a 3-star position, and then he became an Army commander, retired from that position. And he just died last year. Raff was our first commander. He was a fiery little guy. He was about 5'5". He walked in the room, he became 9 feet tall. He was one of those people. And he'd go around banging, I need this in my unit, I need more half tracks. And unfortunately, when his turn came for promotion, these guys remembered he didn't go through channels, and they killed his promotion. He retired as a full colonel. He should have been more than that. But he was a very impressive guy. And he was at one of our reunions in Boston, and I pulled him off to one side of the bar, and I said, Edson, I said, you and I are now retired colonels. I'm going to tell you what I think of you. You're the most arrogant, tactless, overbearing, insufferable SOB I ever met in my life. But if you walked in that door and said, let's go, I'd be the first guy out there with you. And he laughed at that. But he was a very impressive guy. He was, by the way, the only commander, in fact, the only person who jumped first in 2 invasions, the first and last invasions. He was the first man out of the plane when the invasion came in from England, and he jumped out at the in Algeria. He was the first man out. When he was sent back home, he formed the 507th Parachute Infantry of the 13th Airborne Division, and they jumped across the Rhine River in Operation Varsity. He was the first man out of the plane. Tremendous guy. But I mean, I think the most vivid memory I have of the people I served with. They're just guys that went out of their way to watch your back. I remember one night on the Anzio beach, I had to go up the forward area all the time for this, that, and the other thing. And I was up there one night, and Sergeant Charles Farmer was on the position, and the Germans set up a flare. Now, you were trained, hopefully, that you didn't hit the ground. You just froze in place, because if you moved, they would see it. And Farmer stuck his neck out and risked his own neck to be noticed. He yelled out, "Lieutenant, don't move." And the flare went off and nothing happened. And he was there to cover for me. There were some tremendous guys there. Our parachute rigger, the chief rigger, was a man named McLaney, and he was in the original, what they called the test platoon. And these were the guys at Fort Benning. They were volunteers from the 29th Infantry at Fort Benning, and they volunteered for the original jumping training at Fort Benning. And the legend was that McLaney told you to take this barracks bag full of laundry and jump with it, you'll be okay. And he was very reliable. And I remember we were doing training jumps in North Africa, and I was behind a fellow named Nicky DeGata, who's our poet laureate, and he went out perfectly, and I went out okay, and all of a sudden I couldn't look up because my cords were twisted around, so they opened up, I spun around, and I looked up, and the parachute ripped open from the bottom to the top. They're just held together by the ring at the apex. And so someone went by me and said, pull your reserve, which I did. It just fell down, nothing happened. I hit pretty hard, but I made it okay. And Nick somehow, and with a perfect jump, misjudged the ground because it was covered with this high wheat and had an illusion that the ground was here. It was actually down here. And he broke his leg, and that was the end of his dancing career. So we always kid each other about that when I see him.
Would you say that your experience changed your perception on war in general?
Well, I didn't have any presumption. I mean, I knew war was an unpleasant business, but it made me believe that something the best thing you can do with your life is work for peace. I mean, this is not like these other wars. If you read Hitler's Mein Kampf, that was his blueprint. He was going to conquer the world and enslave everybody in this country. And we had to fight because they had declared war on us. And what made it easier was there was a lot of public support, of course. And what I always look back on, that I would say that in many ways we won the war in spite of some of the leadership and command. We won the war with the initiative and the guts and the judgment of the American soldier, which I mean everybody involved. And they were just great men to be with.
Well, if you don't have anything else to add.
I'm trying to think of something else to say, but I just can't think of anything more at the moment.
Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure being here.